Hey, RiverDogs fans, welcome to our second episode of Three-Peat After Me, a RiverDogs Three-Peat podcast talking about the three championships over the last three seasons. Today we have a couple of special guests who are going to give us sort of a different view from outside the clubhouse, but inside the management and the front office. President and GM of the RiverDogs, Dave Echols, and President of the Goldklang Group, the RiverDogs ownership group, Jeff Goldklang, going to talk about what it was like coming out of the pandemic into the start of this championship run, what it meant to be part of and leading the first championship in team history in over 100 years, and does winning influence the business of minor league baseball? We'll talk to them on another exciting episode of Three-Peat After Me. All right, Jeff, Dave, thanks so much for stopping by the podcast today. Really excited to have you guys. Let's just get started with maybe if you can recall the first time you two met, and whoever wants to go first here. Obviously, it wasn't that long ago. You're still very young in the industry, but do either of you remember the first time you met or have an interesting story from that occurrence?
I do. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. I may have met you briefly in Charleston in the offices, but what I recall more vividly is having a couple of drinks and a few meals with you in Cooperstown, New York, several decades ago. Again, you may know the year better based on your travails in both Charleston and Brockton, but certainly that to me is the first time we really engaged.
I think you're right. I'm sure I got to Charleston the first time just as the '98 season ended, so I'm sure through visits and quick hellos, but I think you're right. The first time I actually recall having conversations and actually, really having a hello was Cooperstown, and that was kind of my introduction to the Goldklang Group, and that was kind of what kicked it all off.
And the reason we're here is obviously the three-peat, which is a big part of that. A huge part has been the Tampa Bay Rays, but I think also what we want to touch on in this podcast is what makes Charleston special. We've seen it during the playoff runs, but you've seen it years and years before that. So, Jeff, I'll start with you. As someone who's been involved with different organizations around minor league baseball and seen a lot of places and how they operate, what is it that makes Charleston a special place and so close-knit to the community and that everything just works out so well in a minor league setting?
I almost want to say everything. I think that's a little too basic of an answer. As you're probably aware, we purchased the club in 1989. We were at College Park down on Rutledge Avenue. And again, Charleston has always been a historic, wonderful city. And in the late 80s, early 90s, it was no different. I felt then it was one of the better markets in minor league baseball. We didn't quite yet have the facility. And then in 97, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, when we moved into the Joe, it almost coincided with the boom of Charleston. Charleston was a historic southern city when we bought this, and today Charleston is one of the greatest cities in America all around, both from a tourism, from just a growth perspective, and I think we embody what Charleston has become. We've grown along with Charleston. We've maintained from day one to now. I don't think there's much argument that we're the number one family entertainment destination in the city. And I think again we embody what the Charleston spirit is. We entertain you. You have an evening of fun, laughter, and baseball. And at the end of the day, that's what we bring to the fans and bring to the community.
Yeah, I think, and there might be time later in this conversation where I can make fun of Jeff or whatever.
There's always time. Yeah.
But to elaborate on that, I mean, I've been in baseball almost 30 years and seen what it takes and how operations come and go. And I think definitely what Jeff said, but he's not going to say it. It needs to be said that we wouldn't be where we are and successful as we are without the Goldklang family and the Goldklang Group as operators and owners of the ballpark, because they are what everything else stems from. And I mean, again, I've seen other operations. I've worked for other operations, and there's not many, if any, that are operated like the Goldklang Group and how they handle Charleston. And so it's wonderful to be a part of that. But you can also step back and appreciate it, especially when you see the transformation that minor league baseball's gone through, not just since COVID, but even the previous regimes of how minor league baseball was operated with families and if they had multiple teams or not. So this Head and Shoulders ownership group is really, I think, where you plant the flag.
I think and I've been with a few other organizations as well, and the thing that caught me off guard in a really cool way when I started was when you picked up the phone and called somebody and said, "I'm Jason with the RiverDogs," people knew that was the minor league baseball team in the city, and that's not the case. Wherever you go, you might have to say, "I'm from the RiverDogs, the minor league team." Did that take a lot of work to get to that point? Because that was in place when I was here, or was that kind of always the way it's been, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's repetition, certainly for putting on a good operation and doing what you say. I mean, College Park was College Park, but when we transitioned to the new ballpark, you really were able to turn the table and push the envelope with growth opportunities and the operation and ownership. We took those up. We followed through on that, and so we've been, as Jeff said, we're growing with the city, and I just think we've been hitting on all cylinders. And again, it doesn't hurt when you've got the successful recognition of ownership. It doesn't hurt if Bill Murray's walking around. It doesn't hurt that you've got local ownership that is involved and helping pull strings when those strings are needed. So it's just all those facets are continue to click and are aligned. And it's our job now not to screw that up.
I think the overarching thing here, the beginning or the genesis of the whole three-peat and the successful run you've been on, and you look where the RiverDogs are at now, was that 2020 season, which was about a month after I showed up here. It gets canceled. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. That was supposed to be the last season before the minor league restructure, and everybody kind of knew that. From an ownership perspective, what was that time like? If you think back to March of 2020, you knew some big significant change was coming, but then that happened. What kind of took place behind the scenes as you're trying to process what's going on?
Abject fear. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that we had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. We had an inkling early in 2000, I would say late March, when I actually was down in Charleston with my son and his high school team on a baseball spring training trip, when we got a sense that this season may be in peril. And we understood that at the end of that year, or prior to the 2021 season, Major League Baseball had at least signaled at that point that there would be some changes. So we actually went into the canceled season of 2020, and Dave can speak to this a lot better than I can, just trying to keep our heads above water and figure out something that was outside of anything that we could control, which was who would we be affiliated with in 2021? Would we even have an affiliation in 2021? None of that was clear until the fall of 2020. And so those 6 months, we did our absolute very best just to keep as many people on staff, and I think we did a significantly better job than just about any other minor league team as possible, and prepare for whatever came in 21.
Yeah, I'd say it straddled the fence on an answer, in the sense of I've never had in the industry, in my time in the industry, not slept, coming home
right.
from work or worrying about what was coming down the pike and how we were going to accomplish it or attack it. And everything was just so new in that regard. And you're worried about staff that you had to give a little bit of a break from. You're worried about the staff that's there. You're worried about the next 2 weeks of payroll. You're worried about, is there going to be a team? All of those stresses were just so unbelievably real. But at the same time, as I alluded to earlier, the ownership gave a good, strong sense of comfort. And Jeff's saying, a little bit of unknown fear there, but on the weekly calls and the communication to the teams, you didn't see that or feel that. You felt the ownership was in your corner. You felt that ownership knew what the stakes were, and that they were devising a plan, and they were including us in that as we work together to come up with a strong solution. So a lot of worry and a lot of stress, but at the same time, I felt like if there was a group to be aligned with, or that had some bigger picture knowledge that could ease that fear over time, that was readily apparent. So that was helpful from our end at least to me, and then hopefully filtering that down to everybody else. So again, and I would put us in rare category probably with minor league baseball for that.
I remember it took.
Jason,
Yeah.
one of the things, by the way, that was the most depressing moment of that period of time. There was a day, I think it was 75 or 80 degrees and sunny in early to mid-April. And Dave calls me, and I said, Dave, where are you right now? He said, I'm actually sitting next to the pool. And he said, this is the most depressing, cloudless sky, poolside conversation that I've ever had in my life and probably will ever have. So
yeah, that was kind of all of us just sitting around waiting to find out what was going to happen, and it didn't get canceled until June or July, correct?
Well, right, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but I mean we were also dealing with MLB and the PR mess and MLB's takeover of minor league baseball and what that implied, and you heard the scuttlebutt of how they're going to divvy up the affiliations and all that. So that you tacked all that together, and that was a very stressful 6 months without a doubt.
I remember kind of refreshing Twitter all the time because a lot of baseball news was coming from Jeff Passan and people like that, and you were just trying to find out what's happening. And you knew at some point, once the season was canceled, that they were going to be announcing affiliations, who was going to be part of the new look minor league baseball. And I just remember refreshing it, and I think, if I remember correctly, the Yankees somehow came out who their affiliates were going to be. So we kind of had a heads up that it wasn't going to be Charleston. But what was the first, and I remember when I saw it was the Rays, I was really excited because I knew how successful they had been, and obviously they were in Hudson Valley prior. But what was kind of the first moment when it became clear that the Rays were going to be in Charleston?
It's interesting because I received a phone call from the Rays sometime in the fall of 2020. And I see it on my phone. I'm not certain what to think of it. Pick it up. It was to call us to inform us that they would no longer be affiliating with us in Hudson Valley. And it was obvious at that point the New York Penn League was no longer going to exist. And at that point, most of the teams were starting to reaffiliate as best they could, at least at the lower and mid minor league levels from a geographical standpoint. So I received that phone call, and at the end of it, I said, hey, we know nothing. Have you heard anything about what may or may not exist with Charleston? They said they hadn't, but that they were aware there was significant interest. Now, what that did was that gave me a little bit of comfort knowing that there was a likelihood that the RiverDogs would survive. And again, geographically and from a market standpoint, facility standpoint, it made a tremendous amount of sense that we would. But until we see that final confirmation, we weren't sure. So I asked them at that point, and I said, okay, that's great. And at the end of the phone call, they said, gosh, we've had a great relationship. And I said, yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. So that was the extent of that conversation. Almost a, hey, we'd love if you came back, and we have no control over it. But again, if we do receive another phone call alerting us to that fact, we'll be happy. It was not until literally the eve. I don't recall if it was 48 hours or 24 hours prior to the official announcement when Major League Baseball alerted all of their 30 clubs to inform those minor league teams that we knew it was the Rays. We had heard rumors that it was some other Southeast teams. We figured it was not the Braves because at the time they owned all of their affiliates. So maybe it was going to be the Marlins. Maybe it would be another team in the Mid-Atlantic. Again, had no inkling as to who it was. But when I received that phone call, and I believe it was from Mitch Lukovics with the Rays saying, do you mind if we reaffiliate and join you after 16 or 17 years? And I couldn't get off the phone quick enough and call Dave and our family and let everyone know that would be the path.
Yeah, that was a great phone call, and strange enough, I think shortly after that, I think Mitch called the office and talked to me, and that we were Rays, Yankees, and now we're Rays again, and there was still some synergies there that made it easy, and I think the individuals that were still with Tampa were letting everybody that was, for lack of a better word, newer with Tampa on the relationship with the RiverDogs previously, and a lot of those people had the relationships with Jeff and Marvin up in Hudson Valley in the New York Penn League, so it made for a really a fun dialogue, a fun conversation to start the relationship again and off and running, I guess.
You brought up Mitch Lukovics, and I was going to ask about him before you brought him up, Jeff, but a guy that it seems like wherever he is in the ballpark, he's finding somebody that knows him and has a conversation with. And I think Jeff McLaren and George Pappas and the managers we've had have sort of been the same way. But how important is it to have a guy like Mitch who can just talk baseball and knows everything about everybody to be part of an affiliate that you're with?
Mitch may have been one of the first people that I ever dealt with in a professional capacity in minor league baseball. I was a kid, and he's been around. I mean, he was with the Yankees back then. He's been around forever. He has the respect of literally every single person I've come in contact with in the game, and he's just a good person. Other than being a phenomenal talent scout and player development operator, and so being able to deal with Mitch and Jeff and now Blake and George, and again anyone in the Rays organization. And I tell people in the industry, there's a lot of people that are good at their jobs. There's a lot of good people. There's fewer that are both good people and really good at their jobs. To an individual in the organization, the Rays are that. And again, I think having people like Mitch there for so many years is a testament to that. They don't just hire good people at their jobs. They hire people who have real good moral and ethical fiber. And it's I can't speak highly enough about our ability to work with them on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's hard to. I mean, that's the exact best way to describe it. And when you're talking with Mitch, not only now after 3 seasons does he know everybody in the ballpark. Everybody feels like they know Mitch. But when you're talking to him and you're talking about the state of baseball, when I'm just catching up with him and talking about the other affiliates, he's rattling off, the GM in Durham and the GM in Durham's son, and I mean he knows all of those particulars about every one of his affiliates and the people he comes in contact with, and you just don't find that very often anymore.
The first season then that started this run of a three-peat, which is pretty rare, and we'll talk about that in a greater scale later, but was coming back to playing baseball in 2021, and it had been a year and a half since there was a game here. And I remember the Citadel played South Carolina here before our season started, and that was kind of the first game where there were a couple thousand people together in a place, and it wasn't full, but it felt like, wow, what is this? It's loud. The ballpark is electric. It was my first game that I saw here under that scale. But starting 2021, there were so many changes. We went cashless. You had to separate people from sitting near each other into groups. Right. But what are your thoughts about when you think back, and it feels like a long time ago now, the way the 2021 season started and then eventually seeing really good baseball here from the RiverDogs?
Yeah, it was amazing to think how 1,000 people felt like it was a full right. a full house, when we had those restrictions. But I think I go back to ownership and the way the RiverDogs try to be leaders in the industry and keeping fans first. So we were one of the first teams to really roll out a open the gates plan and policy, and it was copied and commented on by the entire sports industry, not just minor league baseball. So I felt really good about our strategies and plans there. But it was still a really unique and stressful time because, we were restricted with attendance. You're worried about the profitability. You're worried about fan safety. You're worried about the players and their safety. It was just hopefully a once in a lifetime stressful situation. And I think we weathered that really well. And Tampa had good policies in place, certainly what was handed down from MLB, but then how they went about it. So I felt good about executing it. But it was still a really, really unique time to only allow 1,000 people in the ballpark.
And I remember that team was outstanding almost from week 2.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I didn't even touch on the team itself,
sure.
But you see the first game and you look at the roster and you see how the players are carrying themselves. And I remember looking at and talking with him and taking a step back and going, holy smokes. These guys looked like these were legit ball players coming in to play. They looked like they should have been in Double-A. So it was – I remember being eager to watch the season unfold for sure.
And, the storyline had always been the RiverDogs hadn't won – well, Charleston hadn't won since 1922. the RiverDogs, as they are called, or Charleston baseball in the modern era, hadn't won a championship yet. And I remember thinking, this is a team that is incredible, but we weren't going to have playoffs that year. And so you're sitting there kind of like, man, this would be great if there was something to play for at the end. And I think in June, minor league baseball decided to pivot and say, okay, we can, or Major League Baseball, I should say, we're going to have minor league playoffs. It's just going to be 2 teams. And from that point, I got really excited. I don't know how you felt about that, Jeff, but I was like, okay, we've got a real shot to win because we're already pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot, and you've just got to win one series.
I'm a Yankee fan. I grew up a Yankee fan in and around New York, and that year to me felt like 1994, where we were going to have the best team on paper and not get a shot at it culminating in a championship. And I recall vividly being on the Major League Baseball conference call, and they would have, especially that year, we'd have periodic conference calls with the Office of the Commissioner and several other people from minor league baseball who were making decisions about the schedule. And every single minor league owner begged for us to have playoffs that season. And then the player development guys came on and said it would mean a ton to our guys. And Major League Baseball looked back at each other and said, heck, if the major league clubs want this and the minor league clubs want it, as long as we can confirm the safety precautions remain in effect, let's do it. And again, that was, as you mentioned, we've had 3 completely different years. That year, we felt pretty darn good that we were the heavy favorite going in.
Yeah, that was a special season, a lot of fun to watch, and it just felt like every game we're opening the gates, and I'm going, well, we're going to win tonight. And I can't recall having that thought in a long time and working and following a particular team. So that was real exciting. And, usually, and I say this story a lot when I'm talking around town or to the media, but historically, minor league baseball playoffs are, let's get really close, and if we make it or not, okay, because everybody turns the page. They forget about that they're thinking of other sports and school, and minor league baseball, it's really just an expense as opposed to a chance to enjoy it and hopefully get rally support around the team. And for whatever reason, hopefully it's a new trend, but that 21 season, the playoffs were unbelievable. And I think that really helped propel us to the first ever championship.
And it was sort of an awkward playoffs. Sorry, Jeff, if you had something to say, go ahead.
No. I was all I was going to say is, and I think we're going to probably begin talking about this shortly. But in minor league baseball, as most people in the industry know, as Dave alluded to, the support you receive from your community and your fans, it's difficult to generate. It's difficult to make it feel like the important, because people go back to school. It's not on the schedule. We haven't sold groups to it. So the ballpark usually feels a little light and empty. And again, it's a testament to our staff, behind Dave, and you had people like Garrett, and now you have Evan and Savannah and the whole ticketing staff. They have filled the ballpark consistently for 3 years in the playoffs. It's the first question I am asked by both Major League Baseball and other operators in minor league baseball whenever we go to industry events. How the heck did you fill that ballpark? And we say, got a great staff selling it. And man, Charleston loves winners.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, and that's
well. Just when we traveled on the playoff games,
right?
I mean, you can just use this past year as an example.
Sure.
I mean, there was unfortunately, nobody there for those away games, and to have the team come back and play it at home, that's just a galvanizing feeling for them. And so I certainly think that helps push the envelope, and 3 in a row.
That was the moment for me when I realized how much people cared. We were in Kinston in 2021, as you mentioned, this year as well, and there was no TV. And I remember getting an email from you, Jeff, during like the 4th inning of Game 1. We had a very close lead, and you're like, we got to hang on and win this. And I'm like, there's a lot of people. This is the only way to catch the game tonight because it's not on MILB TV. And there weren't a ton of people there. And then our guys showed up here on Friday, and it was standing room only, a crowd of over 6,000. Didn't quite finish it, just needed one win. Then it was Saturday. There was 5,500 in here, again, standing room only. Couldn't quite finish it. And I would imagine that it was that feeling that we're going to win the championship, but all of a sudden you have a winner-take-all game. And I'm guessing you don't hate it from the perspective of you got to fill the ballpark 3 nights in a row. But also, at that point, losing the championship would have been devastating. That was my thought when I woke up on Sunday. Like, if we don't win it this year, that's going to hurt.
Yeah, I certainly was trying hard not to think in those terms. I just tried to stay in the moment and keep everybody, that I'm interacting with in the clubhouse and everything from a positive, reaction, and let them see that we're thinking positive. So that was a once in a lifetime feeling for sure. The first one.
There was I believe there was a foul ball that dropped in the ninth inning between home and first in Game 5, and I looked at Dave. I go, "Uh-oh," we may have it, but thankfully that didn't pan out.
Yeah, I remember it was kind of a weird year because we were so far separated from the clubhouse compared to normal. I couldn't be on the bus. Right. You couldn't be in the clubhouse. We didn't go in and talk to the manager in his office. There was a lot of Zoom calls and texts and emails and catching somebody from a distance when you could. But, man, when the last out was caught, and, again, it was a pop-up right around home plate, the feeling of, you do the same thing every year, trying to be successful and draw a crowd, but every once in a while the guys on the field do something incredible and you get something out of it.
Yeah.
But that was a great night. When he caught that ball, the joy that, the staff was gathering in the Seger Club, you watched the players celebrate, and they didn't allow the on-field celebrations that year.
And they wouldn't let us in the clubhouse.
No dog pile.
Yeah.
Couldn't get in the clubhouse, but it was still, in a very unique way, a night that I won't forget. But what was that night like for you guys?
Yeah, I remember, especially when we had that pop-up and we looked at each other and we're like, shoot. I just remember, the Yankees gave us great teams. And if you look at the 16 years, the winning percentage, we were in the old Sally League, we were the top team. I mean, we had the most wins and fewest losses for those 16-year span, yet no championships and only, less than a handful of playoff games. And so it felt like we got really close every year with the Yankees and then just, for whatever reason, couldn't get over the hump. And so in my mind, as we're in those playoffs, I think there was a little bit of that in the back of my mind going, we got to close the deal. We got to close the deal. And when that happened, it was, I don't know. I mean, we're not players. We're not
right.
We're not on the field and we're not swinging and missing and catching the ball. But you still, when you're in the minor league front office, you feel connected. You feel like it's your season. You feel like it's your team and you're contributing in a way to help get them over the hump. And so it was, I just remember just decompressing. I mean, it was almost, I wouldn't say that the entire stress of 2020 all rolled into one, but it was a lot of that, I think.
To me, it felt like the end of the pandemic. And I know that it wasn't quite right. I mean, we went up and down a little bit into the next year, but we hadn't had any social activity with our staff, which is exceedingly rare, in over a year. And when we all retired to the Segra Club at the end of that evening, with just that relaxed feeling.
I think that might have been the whole feeling of the community too, though. You know what I mean? And not just us, not to cut you off there, but I think the crowd sizes that we had and just everybody just frustrated with COVID and the shutdown and the stress. And then here we are, the brand that we are, and we're celebrating. And it's just like, we're, to your point, it's like we're done. It was great.
Yep. Again, if you ask me when did you start feeling normal again, that was really the first night, because we had a full house, and then we all got together as a staff to celebrate afterwards. And quite frankly, it was one of the first days in 9 or 10 months where we didn't have to think about who's wearing a mask here, who's vaccinated there, and whatever protocols were in place. It was just we won. We finally won.
Yeah. That's great.
And of course, when you win a championship, then the pressure or the goal is to design a championship ring, which now you guys are veterans at doing. But that first one, being the first championship ring for a Charleston baseball team, maybe ever. I don't know if they did rings in 1922. You're probably not going to be able to find one. But what was that? I've talked to you both about this for other things, but did you have some pressure to kind of create something that would signify this was the first championship ever, or how did that come about?
For me, I think there was an underlying acknowledgement that we were going to be a little over the top, but certainly with it's minor league baseball, so you can only go so far with the expenses. But we wanted to say, hey, this is the first in 100 years. We wanted it to make a statement, and we had a minority owner who was certainly heavily involved and excited, and wanted to submit some suggestions, and we certainly ran with quite a few of those. And I mean, you can't even wear it. It's it's so big, but I think for the first one in 100 years, I was happy with how it turned out, and happy that ownership really wasn't involved in from a financial standpoint, rolling us back at all. So it was fun to design, fun to brainstorm with, and I think the end result, the major league staff and the players all were, I think, jaw dropping when they saw it. So that was the goal.
My wife Erica likes to say, when I wear it around town in Charleston, depending on the hostess or host stand, I'm either going to get the best seat in the house or the worst seat in the house.
The downside of it being even so big to wear as on a ring, I mean, you can't even wear the pendant. That if staff chose that or a spouse chose that, it's just so big. But it was fun to design.
I tried to put it on next to last year's ring the other day, and they don't fit next to each other on the finger next to it, because that one is knocking around a little bit. Yeah. But certainly a good problem to have. Moving forward to 2022, that was another team that was really good all year long. In fact, they were the second best team in minor league baseball winning percentage wise at the end of the first half. The problem was the team with the best winning percentage was down the road in Myrtle Beach. And that was an interesting night.
Because we had a chance to win that. And who they were playing, was it Kannapolis?
Kannapolis on the road.
And I mean, and we were all standing around watching on the video board, and it was like, all right, they lost. And it was like, what? I mean, just the back and forth was incredible.
And Luis Leon hit a walk-off home run here in the ninth inning just to get us to the point where we could clinch. And I remember, my wife hates this, but we had just had our daughter the night before. So we're watching in the hotel, and he hits the home run. And I'm like, if we make the playoffs here, we might have to name her Louisa after Luis Leon. And fortunately, we didn't have to do that. But we didn't make the playoffs then. But it still felt like, okay, this team is going to find a way in the end. And I know, Jeff, more than maybe a lot of people in your position, like, you're in tune with the team. You care about the team. You know the players. You like to watch the games and learn about the guys as they go on in their career. But that was another special team, as you mentioned, in sort of a different way than 2021, where they were consistently good, but it took a little bit longer to clinch a pot in the playoffs.
It was, and again, Jason, you know this much better than I do, but the Rays are really good about letting us know what they think is going to happen, and then having that play out throughout the course of the season. Dave and I, at the beginning of that year, it may have even been at the winter meetings when they were formulating what the rosters were going to look like. They told us, you're going to have a tremendous amount of talent. A lot of this talent is raw. They're green. Baseball may look very ugly early in the season. And they said the same thing to us this year as well. But as they gel and as they become more comfortable, there's not going to be many more teams talented in the league. And they've been spot on.
But even when you say that, though, just like 21 team, when you came out for the first homestand and looked at the roster and looked at the guys and how they moved on the field and how they carried themselves, I was like, I don't know how Tampa did it again. But that's another AA roster is what it felt like. I mean, as far as, just how mature they were physically and just how they carried themselves and the talent that Tampa was telling us that was actually there or could be there. I was just looking at them going, you're kidding me. We're going to be good.
Right.
And that, I mean, again, what was it?
I do remember Mitch, and I was looking at again, I didn't know who exactly was at the positions. They weren't wearing their numbers at the time. And I remember watching the shortstop, and I turned to Mitch and go, man, that kid can play a little bit. He goes, well, I darn well hope so. That's Carson Williams out there right now. So if he can't, we got a problem.
And he's got a Gold Glove now, and he's 20 years old, so he's doing all right for himself.
Yeah, again, a fun team to watch in every game. Thinking, well, here's another W. That's what it felt like every day as we opened the gates. It really felt like we couldn't lose.
And my favorite part about, I don't know, June to August is when we'll start promoting some of the key players from the first half, and I'll send a press release that, okay, this guy got promoted, and you'll send an email, Dave, that's like, well, what are we going to do now? Like, what's going on? And Jeff or George will say, oh, don't worry, this guy's coming and he's going to be good. And it's almost always correct.
I think last 22 was clearly that, and I was visibly upset when our guys were getting promoted. not for them certainly, but
right.
but for our operation and the team and everybody they replaced them with. And the guys had great seasons and deserved to be promoted. And who they brought in just seemed to actually play better. It was to a T to every promotion and every position. It was just unbelievable how Tampa was coordinating and navigating through the new landscape of how you put together a team and what MLB will allow. So it was, again, kudos to Tampa for how they were able to do that.
And that year ended in Lynchburg, so sort of a different setting. Again, it was a sort of an odd night. We went there, knew that you had to win one of two games. I know you were in town, Jeff. Were you at that game? I can't remember. Okay, but it was sort of a different setting. But the team took control in the middle. It was kind of a chippy game. There was an on-field spat a little bit. The dugouts cleared. I think there might have been one in the crowd as well. I don't believe you were involved in it, but it just had a different feel. And then in the 6th or 7th inning, there was a big inning, and you're like, okay, you're going to win again. And here you are in Lynchburg, Virginia, celebrating a second straight championship.
Yeah, I mean, it was unique. It wasn't a Charleston atmosphere, but it was still fun to be there, and I still felt we were going to win that game. And so I remember the dugouts. I remember the back and forth with the emotions from the teams, and then I remember the celebration in there off site. So it was a lot of fun to be a part of that, to observe it, and we had a contingent of a few staff and some ownership up there. So it was fun to be around everybody who was really excited to witness it. So again, another great experience, and it nothing beats winning it at home, but that was still a lot of fun.
And then looking at this season, and before we get into on the field, we talked about it leading up to the season, but it kind of felt more like normal. And I wasn't here before COVID for a season, but from everything that I understood, the staff was starting to grow to the same size in the front office as it was when I arrived in 2020 before that canceled season. But the ballpark was able to be full. Groups were selling out before the season or getting to close to that point. But I just felt really excited because of the amount of, even though there were relatively new people to minor league baseball, but talented people on the front office staff here, and the things we were putting out with back-to-back championships under your belt. From your guys' perspective, did this last year, not talking about the team or the field, start to feel almost like normal again in a small way?
It did to me. Certainly, going from, I think in 19 we were around 30 to 32 full-time staff, and so then in 20 we were down under 10, and then we were maybe about 14 or 15 in 21. So then we've been able to gradually get it back, and so I don't know, I don't think for 23 that we were all the way back, but we were certainly at a number that allowed us to do what we have traditionally done. And when you're bringing in a lot of new staff that are new to baseball, new to the industry, and new to how Charleston operates and how the RiverDogs operate, that poses challenges. But it was a real exciting time to be able to have the bodies and have the energy and creativity to tackle those necessities, I guess. And so I really enjoyed having the full house back. I think it takes a lot of the stress off of everybody. It spreads that stress out evenly, as opposed to 10 to 12 of us absorbing all of it. So it was a welcome sight to see everybody, and everybody excited to contribute, building off the team success, building off of the community interest that we have. So yeah, I was real excited for the start of the season.
Tarp pulls got easier as well.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's strange. It seemed like we had more tarp pulls with the more staff that we have, but yeah, it's definitely a little easier.
And then the team starts out, and even the people with the Rays will tell you this was not the start of the year they had envisioned. And the team, as you alluded to earlier, Jeff, was younger and younger. A lot of 18, 19-year-olds playing in front of a crowd of this size for the first time. But I'll be honest, in May, June, even part of July, I wasn't anticipating we'd have a podcast talking about a three-peat. It just didn't seem like that was something that was going to happen. But thank goodness minor league baseball is divided into two halves.
Yeah, I remember just going, okay, we finished the first half in last place, right? And so we went on that run to start the second half and held on. So it never felt like like the first 2 years.
Right.
It didn't feel like we were setting ourselves up for a championship run or for, hey, let's get them on sale as early as possible. It was a different makeup, a different team, a different league structure. So, it didn't have the vibe as the first 2 years for sure.
Yeah, the first two, again, I utilized the term earlier. First two almost felt like they were coronations. We deserved it. We were the best team in the league, clearly, I think, both times, at least in my opinion, from a talent perspective. This year was a grind. And to me, you almost, especially when you start winning them, you almost really appreciate that a little bit more. It's never going to be like that first year, but this year, just kind of coming out of nowhere. We didn't. I agree, Jay. I looked at this and I actually remember having the conversation with Dave saying we can schedule our meetings a little bit earlier this year because I don't know that we're going to have any playoffs. And then that's slowly changing as the second half went along. Again, culminating in that last game, which you have a first inning and think that it's going to be a cakewalk, and you're biting your fingernails by the top of the eighth or top of the ninth.
But again, how much kudos can we harp on Tampa? I mean, again, when we promoted guys, we got guys in that kept us at that same competitive balance, and again, the team was not as successful in the wins and losses in the first half of the year, but keeping majority of the guys here and actually if you're watching the games, seeing the development that they had, so they clearly were developing and better ball players in the second half of the season, and Tampa, with their strategy allowing that to happen, we were able to reap the benefits of it. So 3 years in a row of Tampa pushing the right buttons and from a roster, manipulation, and it's unbelievable how they're doing that.
I also want to say this completely off the field, though. One of the proudest moments I had as an owner, and Dave, I don't know if you recall exactly who sent it to you, and this was one of Blake's years. I think it was his second year managing. So last year, got an email of just a picture of the guys cleaning up the ballpark and their dugout after a game. And the general manager sends Dave, I've never seen this before. It's just the professionalism that usually in your head wouldn't accompany the youth that is attached to these players. But it's just there's a structure that the Rays have, a special sauce, which just plays out across not just the RiverDogs, but all levels of their minor leagues.
That's a story I tell all the time. We were in Salem early in the year, in Salem, Virginia. It was a game I believe we lost. And we heard about this email being sent and a picture of 4 or 5 guys cleaning up the dugout. And the ops guy from the Red Sox had said, "What are you guys doing? Like, this is my job. You don't have to do it." And they're like, "We're adults. You don't need to clean up after us." And I have never seen that in my life in professional baseball. And I think that is a great example of what the Rays do and the people they have.
Yeah, I don't know that I've heard that at any professional sports level, or any sport for that matter. So that kudos to Blake and Tampa and their professionalism and what they expect out of their crew. So it's it's what sets Tampa apart.
Jeff, I'll ask you this first, and Dave, if there's anything to follow up on it with, but how much, you're doing things a certain way to be successful regardless of what the results are on the field, because you can control what you can control, but how much does having a historically good team the last 3 years do to make the business side a little bit easier and to get people in the ballpark and have the kind of year you hope to have?
I would have told you that I have 3 decades of experience that would say it's not all that important. And then I'll tell you that the last 3 years have changed my mind with respect to Charleston. I think, listen, the RiverDogs are going to be the RiverDogs, whether we're in last place or we're in first place. I think the community is going to come out and support what we do because I think we do it really well. But when they're coming at the end of the day, they're coming to watch a baseball game. And when the talent on the field is what it is with the Rays, where you're going to see future major league players, you're going to see a tremendous quality of baseball, and in all likelihood, you're going to see a win. That makes our job a little bit easier. Certainly, we don't market to that. We'll take advantage of it, but we don't market specifically to the winning, but it absolutely does help.
And I can't remember in my time in Charleston, over 20 years, the interaction I have with the community where the default answer to how Jeff just described it is, well, it's such a great time over there, very family friendly. I mean, you still have that, and I think that's what we're known for and what we market. But I can't recall how many times now, and it hadn't happened prior to these 3 seasons and off seasons, where I'm having conversations with decision makers, business leaders, and they're talking about the 3P. They're talking about the wins and the losses, and how they're paying attention to that, and what how exciting that is for the team and the community. So it's really a unique experience if you're sitting down with a bank president talking about their partnership with the RiverDogs, and before it was, hey, you guys do some funny stuff over there, and Bill Murray's going to be there, right? And so we still have those kind of conversations, but they immediately want to talk about the championships and the wins and losses and the players on the roster. So that's a 180. I've not experienced that to the degree that we are now.
Just to get away and kind of wrap this up in a lighthearted way, I guess, not to put you on the spot. If one of you wants to go first, do either of you have a memory from your time in Charleston that stands out as, man, that's something that I'll never forget, being part of the RiverDogs? This is a day or an experience or an event that we hosted that stands out as being maybe the pinnacle of your time associated with the RiverDogs?
I'll say 2 things from mine. I interned in the early '90s, and I had never been to Charleston beforehand. I think I might have visited one time when the family originally bought it in '89. I have very little memory of that. I remember driving up to the ballpark, the old College Park, walking in to that rickety place, and just feeling this sense of elation that I get to come to a ballpark for 71 games at the time and work here. And again, I feel that a lot of our staff and a lot of our fans feel that way walking into a ballpark, that splash of green that you see. And again, the other is the culmination of a lot of work in 1997 of opening up the Joe and having Mayor Riley at the time walk down onto the field with us, just look around and say, looks like we got this one right, boys. And that was just that was a good feeling.
Yeah, that's a hard one to say one, because starting again in 21 after being that scare for all of 2020 was something I'll never forget. Certainly Dwyer making that pop catch is 1A, 1B right there for the culmination of the first championship. I met my wife in the ballpark, so hard to say there's a better experience than that.
You had to say that, correct?
And I don't know if she's going to watch the podcast, but I'll get it out there. But also the we hosted a neutral site game between Clemson and Carolina, and that, to me, that was 6,000, 3,000 of each, and just rocking the stadium from side to side, and the type of game and how it ended. That was a hard game to top. Although I think the championship for me tops it, but that neutral site game was a heck of an experience, and it doesn't count as in the ballpark. But when we did the home run derby off the Yorktown, I think arguably the best promotion ever in minor league baseball, and we still don't get enough credit for that. But that was a phenomenal experience to take the All-Star game to that level of extreme that I don't think it had been done before, and I think people are still trying to figure out how to top it. That was a great promotion.
I think to appropriately wrap this up, we should start to, as we've done, turn our attention to 24. What are some things that both of you are excited about as you set out, as crazy as it is to say, to try and win a 4th straight championship, but also with having that almost full complement of staff members that you're excited about for next season?
Well, ownership just keeps telling me you got a full staff now. No excuses. So they're just continuing to pound us. No, I'm excited. The full staff certainly is exciting. I think creatively we've got a lot of energy and excitement there that I'm excited to come to fruition. We've expanded the ticket staff, so from an operation, I think we should have a good handle on it, and so I'm excited for everybody to have that year or two under their belt to really release the creativity that we want to see and be known for. So I'm excited to do that. I think the community's ready to see if we can four-peat and see what we can do. So it's exciting to have those challenges in front of us, and it'll be even more fun to watch us achieve it.
And I for 30 plus years, I've been waiting to move to Charleston. We officially have done so. So I'm excited on an everyday basis.
Oh, I forgot to say, and Jeff moved to Charleston.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
I'm real
Yeah,
excited.
that's
real
another
excited
important
about
one
that.
you got to check
Well,
on.
I'm in town now. Again, I don't know if that's something that the staff is tremendously excited about. They're going to have to see me a little bit more often and at most games. But certainly, from my standpoint, I am ecstatic to be down here just about every day and experience what hopefully is just another great RiverDog season. And if we top it with a fourth, gosh, that's going to be that would be one heck of a story.
I'm going to speak for everybody else and just say that I've heard nothing but positive remarks about you moving here in the office, Jeff. Everybody is ecstatic about that opportunity.
They saw the memo I put out, and that's what they're supposed to say. So it's perfect.
Josh may not be as much. I want him to come and prepare some dishes for the staff at the house one of these days. So.
Awesome. Well, I think you guys obviously a very busy time of the year, busy schedule. So I thank you both for taking a chunk of time out to share with us, but really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you guys have a happy holiday season and can't wait for 2024.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to the podcast developing and seeing the creativity there. I think there's a lot of fun you can have with that. And, let's design another one.
Thanks for having Jason. Thrilled to be here.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Three-Peat After Me. Make sure to follow the RiverDogs on Facebook, Twitter, X, or Instagram at Chaz RiverDogs. That's at CHAS RiverDogs. Let us know what you think. If there's any guests you want to hear from, or if you have any questions for future guests, we'd love to hear from you. Excited for next week's podcast. We'll talk to a player for the first time, Jack Snyder, 2022 RiverDogs relief pitcher, will be on the podcast sharing some of his thoughts about his championship season here in Charleston. Have a great weekend, everyone.